Welcome to the HR Community Podcast. My name is Shane O'Neill, founder of Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Each episode we will host HR leaders and discuss their journey and discover best practice HR solutions across the HR industry. Whether you're a CEO, HR executive, or operating across the wider HR space, this podcast is for you. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment and share your reviews. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Community Podcast. I'm joined this morning with Ben and Francine Balestrieri. Both Ben and Francine are co-founders of We, People Considered Together. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Good to have you both. Over to you both, actually. And I don't know if you prefer Ben and Francine or Francine and Ben, but and I will give our guests the heads up. It's a bit of a milestone for us this morning because this is our first duo on the podcast guest. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us as your first duo. That's exciting.
Not at all good. Over to you guys. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, your individual backgrounds, and we can get involved into your industry backgrounds. And then finally, I'd love to hear a bit more of how it all came together and who is we and what's the vision.
Since it's Francine and Ben, I'll go first. I have 25 probably years too many to talk about experience in generalist HR, and that's been through various industries. So in recent times, I've become really attached to the organisational development and the forwarding of the DEI strategy, leadership development and culture transformation. So had a lot to do with change management through the project work, but all aspects of generalist HR have kind of brought me to this point, and a lot of experience and I guess personal experience and professional experience has brought me to the point where we've created We, and all different backgrounds actually, like in terms of industry. So I've worked in probably again too many to talk about, but most recently FMCG and CPG has been the big ones.
Fantastic. And how about you, Ben?
Yeah, so look, my career has been mainly in sales and marketing. So I grew up in sales in media companies. Started my career selling newspaper advertising space, and then progressed through to kind of marketing from media into FMCG, where I've spent kind of most of my career. It's really fortunate though. I think at a really young age, I've led teams, and leadership's been a huge part of kind of who I am as a business person, and was really lucky at kind of a really, really tender age to actually take on my first team, and I've had teams since then. And I think kind of one of the things that kind of leads us to We, for me personally, is around inclusive leadership. And I think Francine's done a tremendous job of educating me and opening my eyes to the power of inclusive leadership, and seeing that actually in action has something that's really sparked me, not only on kind of the individuals that are in my team, but also the performance and the culture that it brings. So that kind of led us, we've been talking probably for 4 years around We and kind of the role that it could play, and kind of starting something in this space. But at the heart of it, we saw this stat, and it was 63% of people feel like they need to cover some sort of aspect of their personality when they come to work.
Wow.
Yeah, you kind of just think about that and just go, that's not okay. So at the heart of We and what we're trying to create is we exist simply so you can be you. And that's our mission and our purpose, is really to create workplaces where you can turn up and be yourself. And it's really sad that that's not the case across so many organisations, and so many people we talk to, kind of tell us these stories about the experiences they've lived through organisations. And, it really spurs our passion in this space to create positive change. So we created We, and, 4 months later, here we are kind of, starting our journey.
Very exciting. And I guess when it comes to, and we'll sort of chat about some of these elements today, from a recruitment perspective, which is sort of where I would look at it, there's so much demand for talent still. And there's certainly been in recent years this huge shift, and organizations have sort of had to pivot and move to attract the best talent, but also from a candidate perspective. And we talk about this all the time with applicants for some of our roles. It's that true vision and purpose and connection to what they're doing in their role, what they're doing in their industry, which I think is really important. And it kind of relates back to what you were talking about, Ben, with that sort of identity and personality that people sometimes feel they need to create to adjust and to connect with the business.
It's really interesting, Shane. I'd love to pick your brain about it, but we recently wrote sort of a week's article and blogs around the fact that recruitment there's so much pressure on recruitment to bring in the diverse talent. And to your point, and people are looking for that, and organisations say we really want diverse talent because we know that it brings performance and innovation, and there's been lots of studies done that it can increase all those things. So we know it's good for business, we know it's good for employee experience and engagement. But what happens is we rely on the recruiters to bring in diverse talent. And then they come into the organisation and then they find themselves in an organisation that perhaps then doesn't support it. So it's not in their DNA, it's not in their ways of working, it's not in, the way that they do their onboarding, or in the way that they do their remuneration or training or leadership development. So then what you end up doing is spending so much time on the recruitment piece and they don't stay. So, and I think you just made the point. The other thing is, there's been a lot of investment over 20 and 21, and then 22 it's fallen off a little bit. Within the economic downturn, organisations have kind of gone, oh, it's a little bit of a nice to have. Yeah. So they stop spending on it and they're cutting back on it. And then what happens, as you would know, is then the talent market is still, as you said, still the war on talent. We still need to look at those things, and they're looking at organisations going, well, if you don't have that as part of your purpose, as part of your priority, is that somewhere I want to work? Because as we know, it trickles down into all those ways of working. Yeah. And then, do I want to be part of that organisation? Do I make the choice of that organisation over that one? So it's an interesting point that you make.
Yeah. And I guess with that as well, and I'd love to pick both your brains on this one, is for an organisation, like for our business leaders, for our senior executives and HR leaders that are listening in, what are the sort of questions or assessments they need to start looking at with their current organization? We've talked a little bit, as you noticed, Francine, with the recruitment. So clearly organizations have looked at, okay, how do we track these people? What do we need to offer these people? But then once you get into the organization, what's the commitment there? And what do you start to need to look at as an organization to make sure that you're actually ticking all the boxes that you initially set the expectation from the recruitment process?
It's such a fascinating question because it's so big and overwhelming. I think that's what we find when we talk to a lot of organisations is around just where do I start? And, it is complex, this space. We're talking about individual humans at the heart of what we're doing. And there are so many factors that surround those people, and how you create that experience for them through the organisation is hard. And it's really interesting to talk to varying degrees of people and their level of understanding in this space as well. So what we try and do is we try and break it down into chunks and look at what we call hubs, where EIB comes to life. So talent, for instance, is one of the hubs. Operations, so looking at like your policies and making sure that they're all set up for success. Through to leadership, we know leadership is a massive role in embedding this through the organisation and actually living it. The employee experience end to end from onboarding to offboarding, that experience looks like, and then also remuneration and benefits, and making sure that that's lining up as well. So we kind of break it down through those chunks. We've got a set of kind of, assessment criteria to help organisations identify, or pinpoint certain aspects of where they're doing really well, or for them to accelerate in certain spaces.
Fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say on that one, I think a lot of people rely on a survey that maybe gets run once a year, maybe once every 3 years, and they go, okay, this is our demographics and this is how people feel. We'll just shelve that for a little while. We might action plan on it a little bit, but to Ben's point, it's like getting the baseline right, and then it's all the action planning through all those hubs. It's all the action planning through those policies, the commitments, even the leadership, outside of inclusive leadership. What's your pipeline of talent as well, and how are you really leaning into ensuring that your pipeline looks different, not just through gender? And this is where I think we need to get to the next level of discussing DIB to go. It's not also the way we approach it is not through the lens of you have to have specific targets. It's about how do you become as inclusive as possible so that you are reflecting your community, not just through what we would describe as, the demographics that most people would understand them as being. So, cognitive diversity needs to be taken into account, as well as, people from different backgrounds. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean, we need to look for different ethnicities. It's around what's your work experience been, and how can we look at things through a different lens. So it is really about being able to take what Ben said there, this complex kind of world where people go, oh, I can't tick all those boxes and I can't do all those things, and how do I manage that and make people feel like they're included and they belong, and my engagement survey is great, and then my employee experience is great. So it becomes this big thing. So how our measurement tools are able to break that down for you, so you've got a really clear baseline through all those parts that Ben was talking about.
Fantastic. And it's really interesting as well, and I know we spoke about this previously with regards to, I guess, the beliefs and the understanding and the vision of the business leader, the board, the CEOs, and actually what's happening on the ground, or what message is delivered. And Francine, I'm sure you can, agree that influencing was something within HR that we've really tried to master, and it's proven, particularly across the wider people and culture life cycle, that ability to influence our stakeholders, that ability to influence our executives. But then there's the influencing, but there's also the aspect that you talked about before, Ben, with actually understanding the reasons behind your CEO, your business leaders, understanding or vision or views on the types of stuff that you mentioned, so the DE&I and stuff like that.
Yeah, look, I think it all comes back to our lived experiences, right? I think, a lot of, CEOs, get the bad end of the stick. They get this label of, pale, stale male. But I think, that's probably not fair at times and unhelpful. And what is helpful is understanding their experiences and why they believe what they believe. So if we look at a lot of CEOs at the moment, with a real focus on employees back in the office, understanding, well, why is that so important? What are the beliefs that you're holding, and why do you have those beliefs? What shape those? And, it might come from, their careers were spent in the office, and they believe that that's all they know, and that's the way to productivity. So it's then through education and, knowledge that we're able to change and shape beliefs. And I think about my personal journey on inclusive leadership, being open to that conversation and learning through that journey has really transformed how I lead teams. And I think you've got to be open. I certainly had beliefs that were challenged through that process from just my lived experiences. And as, you open yourself up to conversation and dialogue in this space, it's the knowledge that then helps transform that into different actions.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about an example before we jumped on here today with a certain organisation, and the one of the new leaders was really a huge advocate for hybrid working, and was really trying to look at their people and culture leaders supporting him to drive it. But then the managing director, the owner of the business, was not totally on board. And you made a good point, Ben, and sort of relative to what you just discussed as to, that kind of lived experience. In an example like that, or if you're a listener listening today and you're in a similar situation to that, where maybe not everyone's on board with the whole hybrid working flexibility piece, what are the sort of questions maybe that you could start to probe your
business leader on, your CEO, or whoever may not be totally on board with the hybrid working?
I'm just going to jump in here and say this is where sometimes Ben and I work really well together. It's the yin to my yang, because I want to tell people all the time, this is really important because, and then I give them all the reasons why this is really important. And then I throw out all the stats and all, what other organizations are doing. But I actually think that's really important, to be honest. Like external facts, internal facts, how many people are you turning over or come through the recruitment process and then turn away because what's your turnover stats, what's your engagement stats? I think those things are incredibly important. But what the research shows is that HR driving this alone will not change the game, because often it's HR and it's these marginalised employees that are really believing that change will come if they get really involved, and that because it affects them. So oftentimes it's this community that is driving it. And to Ben's point, it's the changing of the leadership and being able to coach them and ask them the right questions, aligned with all that feedback, or aligned with all that survey data. But it has to come through the people as well. So we have to have these other lived experiences that say the alternative is that we listen to one perspective at the top and we go down that road, and then we end up with the same results of the recruitment, the turnover, etc. I know Ben's got a really clear view on this as well. So
no, I think both are important, but for me, curiosity is the unlock here. And I think if you're looking for tools around how do you create change and influence, curiosity is the number one thing for me that helps change perspectives. And I think questions are really powerful. And I think questions like, help me understand why you think that way. And exploring and spending time understanding their perspective will give you insights to be able to help to offer different perspectives. And I often think, as a marketer, storytelling is so powerful. And you could look at the same issue through 5 different perspectives and get 5 stories. And I think storytelling becomes then a really powerful way of people sharing their stories and their experiences on potentially the same topic. And through that, we then get a collective full picture and understanding of how they're feeling. No one's right or wrong. It's their beliefs and their experiences that have shaped what they have. But it's through that conversation, that storytelling and that experience that together we can then come and kind of agree or find the right pathway forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's really important too that we also look down the lens of we're not all homogenous groups. So when we talk about females, females don't all have the same experience. I have a very different experience to somebody who has come from, a different socioeconomic status or a different ethnicity. And so I think it's really important that this is the inclusive leadership piece, but when we're making decisions around what's right around hybrid working, again, this is where it becomes really hard for people to comprehend, because we say we can't fix everybody's world. And so Francine's world is going to be different to Shane's world, to Ben's world. And I might have small kids, or I might have sick parents, or I just might want to go to my yoga class at lunchtime every day. And we're all going to have a different need for hybrid, flex, DEI. So it's really just around breaking down. Again, we have to look at it through a different lens, as Ben said, get the curiosity piece, get the facts, get the stats, and put it together in a storytelling. But make sure you're asking those 5 different people about their experience, because the CEO shouldn't get blamed, but they should be curious to in the other way that we've been saying we should be curious about the CEO. CEOs and boards and leadership need to be curious about what it means for the employees and their experiences as well.
Absolutely. And looking at some of the areas that we touched on as well, with regards to the economic climate and the demands, I think we all agree we're all super, super busy at the moment. So does that demand within our businesses at the moment, within the operations, within the front line, regardless of what industry you're in? But then there's this sort of shift with the economic climate that's been happening for quite some time now. And, we can see there's mass redundancies happening. Companies are cutting costs. You both touched on something quite interesting, which I'd love to probe a little further. And it's that sort of relationship between efficiency and then also well-being in the workplace. And I guess now is probably more relevant than ever, because the demands, the workload, and maybe even that fear, if I can't put in 120% here, am I the next person that's going to be identified in the company restructure? So yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
This is a topic very close to my heart because I've been on the wellbeing journey for quite some time, and what we used to do 10 years ago was fruit bowls and fitness first memberships, etc. And we've evolved that. And so today's world, all the points that you just made are really spot on. So companies need to have a look at how far are we stretching our resources, because actually the number one reason people don't feel well at the moment in organisations is burnout. And, it's this constant meeting culture that we have. And so we have to find ways to address the burnout, address the fact we're working with less resources, we're asking people to do just as much. And so we end up with unproductive people that will not give more than they have to, and unwell people. And so that's a recipe for, productive and, performance success as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing on this for me is, once you hit burnout, coming back from that is incredibly hard. And I think, as leaders, we've got to recognise it before that point happens. And I think it's how are you connecting with your team in conversation, really regularly to check in on their well-being. Yes, we've got big jobs, we've got big things to deliver. That's the way of the world. But are you having human conversations as a leader with your team to check in on their well-being? What's happening outside of the workplace? And being really empathetic to that and finding solutions for them to avoid burnout. Because I think it's kind of often what we do is we look at they're burnt out, now we need a solution to solve that. Where we could have, in the first place, actually prevented it through really great leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah, and getting back to the root causes of that, Shane, as well, like really understanding what are the root causes of the burnout, because as I said, this meeting culture has crept in through the pandemic, and so we end up in meetings all day. Have we got agendas? Have we got outcomes? Have we got the right people in the room? Do I need to be in this meeting, or could it be an email? And so just simple things like that. I know that there's organisations going to the extent of going no meetings on certain days. Does that help? Does half day no meetings help? There's just got to be some shifts that we make around getting the most out of people that we have in a way that's productive for the business, that's looking after, as we've been talking about, the well-being, because actually every time we spend an hour in a meeting, the cost of that meeting to the business should be taken into account. So from the performance of the organisation, there's a dollar figure there as well as a wellbeing figure, that when people aren't well, that becomes another dollar figure that has to be taken into account. So getting back to the root cause and the understanding of what's causing it, I think, is the key in this productivity and efficiency conversation.
Absolutely. And I know you're a huge advocate for wellbeing, Francine. So I totally agree with what both of you were saying. But in particular, you touched on something there which I found a little funny, because a long time ago, or many years ago, we would have our, and I read many articles on it, our, avoid burnout, top 5 tips, go for a walk around the park, take some deep breaths, which are all quite valid. When you're there in the moment, but I wouldn't exactly call them preventative solutions long term, especially if you're looking at an overall workforce. Do you see organizations, or at least some organizations, have taken a better approach to it, and sort of what might be some of the ideas that some of those organizations or leaders are doing or implementing or approaching well-being with that others could learn from?
I think Ben can talk to this one about our blogs this week.
Look, I think there's lots of things that organisations can be doing right, and I think it's got to again come back to being ingrained in your DNA. You can't just do a hit and run on it. You can't just send out tips. But I think it comes back for me at the heart of this inclusive leadership, right? Being connected with your people around what's going on for them. And often as leaders, we play the role of a coach. And when we look at coaching our people, there's kind of 4 faces to coaching that we look at. So there's the challenger, there's the expert face that you play, there's the counsellor and the supporter. And I think at times, we want performance and we want to kind of have these conversations with our people when actually they just need a supporter. They might just need a someone to listen, to ask the question, are you okay? Are you really okay? And really understanding what's going on. So I think there's a really big role for leaders. But again, then supported by other things. So, introducing, mindfulness tools. There's great things around, you're having wellbeing weeks and all things set up. But again, it's finding the balance, this tightrope to those things as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to put a wellbeing week in for the entire organisation and soak all the hours out of their week, and now they're burnt out because we're asking them to deliver equally as much. So,
that's right.
Looking at the full picture.
So there's a lot of research, Shane, recently you've probably read, but it's basically saying don't add, like if you've got a good wellbeing program and benefits, don't keep adding to it, because to Ben's point, then you're just adding programs for program's sake, and it's not, like there's a lot of research to say how much of that do people use, and we're wasting a lot of money on programs. So actually, I still come back to those things are important. They've got to be leveled out with those root causes of the day-to-day hybrid, flexible experiences that people have to be able to balance their work and their life and integrate those things, but also that piece around the efficiency and do I have the tools to do my job?
Yeah.
Do I have the training to do my job? Because if I don't have those basic things, that's one of the highest things that will correlate with me feeling like I'm not doing a good job, like I don't want to be at this organisation anymore, and I don't feel well because I'm starting to stress, my anxiety levels go up. So we've got to get the technology, the training, the efficiency right. Otherwise, any other programs, doesn't matter what you do. You've got to get the basics right. Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. And, I've worked in organizations, and I'm sure you both have too, where sometimes someone's in the office for 15, 16 hours. And many, many years ago, they would get a pat on the back. Now it's sort of like, why? Why are you still there? Are you not fully supported? Do you not have the efficiency to do what you need to do within the business hours, whether you're in their office or at home, of course? But I think it's a really interesting and transforming topic that just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I truly feel like we might need to jump on again and do a part 2, because I'm mindful of both of your times on this. But just a couple of quick questions before both of you clock off for today's podcast. And I'd like to hear both your opinions on some of these, but they are fairly short, sharp sort of questions. So in terms of the first one, most influential person.
I'll go first on that. I think Joe Rogan might be one of the most influential people. I think he's a very interesting interviewer that looks at a lot of diverse people and perspectives. And you look at I was listening to a podcast around, censorship and what's going on in the world at the moment. And, his following is so big that, he's one of the few people that can have people on to truly express their feelings, rightly or wrongly. So I think he's one of the most influential for me.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Francine?
It's a really hard question. Thanks for putting me on the spot on that one. So, look, just as top of mind because of the topic that we're talking about, Ivan, the CEO of Diageo, I always talk about him as being somebody that I look to for inspiration. And he would always talk around, so with 40,000 employees, he would always talk about people in the same breath as he would talk about the commercials of the organisation. And so for me, I love talking about him because I see that as being somebody who was really accessible to the people and really able to talk about the success of the organisation and how the people play a massive part in that. And he believed in that. And so I find him so inspirational because I like to tell people that story, that you can get to the highs of the high. And, I think he was knighted, Ben, recently, but he's this amazing, he was this amazing human and had this big responsibility, and he should be somebody that most CEOs look up to for that reason. And so for me, particularly because of this topic, I think he's been, part of my inspiration as well for trying to build compassion in organisations around the people experience.
I love that. That's really cool. Best lesson learned, and we can start with you again, Ben, if we want to go in turns.
I learned one recently, actually, on inclusive leadership, and it was around you're not always going to get it right.
Yeah.
And recently, I got it wrong, and it was really hard on me as an inclusive leader in the standard that I hold myself to. But it's kind of this lesson around when you get it wrong, what do you do with it? And facing into it and owning it, and putting your hand up to say, actually, I did get that wrong, and I'm sorry. And here are, finding out how you could do things differently as a result of that, and learning that lesson and growing as a leader. So I think kind of learning from your mistakes, having that freedom to fail, but then equally learn.
Love that. How about you, Francine?
Yeah, I think lessons learned are things that build your resilience, that build your experience and build your knowledge over time. So I think, goodness, if I went back to every lesson learned, we'd be here for a long time. But I think recently it really, and I mentioned this before, but, really asking more questions and sometimes not having to be the expert. But, as Ben was talking about the 4 phases of coaching, you don't always need to know it all. And sometimes just continuing to ask the questions and being a coach in most moments is better than talking too much and actually having to be the expert in the room, because oftentimes you're not going to get the traction. So still learning that, but it's a skill that should be learned by all of us, I think. Curiosity.
Definitely. Yeah, curiosity. Yeah, absolutely. Ben, who do you inspire?
Oh, look, I hope I inspire in some way everyone that I come into contact with. My purpose in life is to dream big, challenge the impossible, unlock possibilities in others. So I strive to give more than I can take in every relationship that I have, whether I get that right or wrong all the time. Yep. Definitely my aim. So, if I can, have a conversation with someone and change them positively in some way or unlock something in them, then that gives me huge energy. So, that's what I strive for.
Love that. How about you, Francine? Who do you inspire?
Well, coming back to my purpose as well, it really is around helping organisations become more compassionate. And that does mean through the people lens, so that they become successful from a performance lens. So for me, I've gone into a few organisations and, set up a lot of strategy around this space. And so when I get people that come to me and say, thank you so much, you've made me a more inclusive leader. Thank you so much, in terms of the flexibility agenda has changed my world. And these are real, that just those people that will come up and say thank you, and I don't need the thanks, I just need to see a change in the organisations. And for me, one of a team member just recently had said to me, they were talking to another leader in the organisation, and said her daughter was sick, so not my team member, the other one. And she said, I found it really hard, I couldn't take a day off, and my leader's a bit funny about that. And my team member said, wow, that must be really hard, because my leader, is really flexible around that space, really understands that space. And so if my child is sick, that's okay. I can work from home, and there's never any question around it. And I think that kind of feedback makes everything that I do worth it. So that's bit by bit, chunk by chunk, we will get there, and we will make organisations more inclusive and more passionate.
I love that. Amazing. That is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time, Ben and Francine and Ben. Some of the insights and the content they're some of the hottest pressing topics across HR. So I'm so glad we had a chance to sort of probe a little bit. But like I say, I think we might need a part 2. But it's definitely got me thinking, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are starting to have an aha moment, or start to think about how they're going to approach it with their business and their team and their leaders over the next couple of weeks and months. But thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. Take care.
Look forward to part 2.
Thank you for tuning in to the HR Community Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe and share your views and comments below. This podcast was brought to you by Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Whether you're a candidate looking for a new role or organisation looking to secure brand new talent for your team, please get in touch with us today. Thank you.